Battle of Bakhmut has been the largest battle ever seen in the war in Ukraine, with a massive number of Russian troops involved, armor, and equipment also on both sides. It has ended up being not only the largest battle in the war, but also the longest, lasting almost 6 months in the second Battle of Bakhmut and several more months, around 4, during the first battle. At this moment, we are currently seeing that the Russians are starting to make advances through the center of the city, and this seems to be the death knell for Bakhmut. The thing is, Bakhmut was never strategically important in the sense of it being a town. Bakhmut was strategically important for the Ukrainians as the terrain provided them an incredible advantage to wreak destruction and rack up the numbers of losses for the Russians as they tried to attack this city. If we look back a long time ago as well, you can even see that the city of Bakhmut was the largest one within a few miles of the current Russian front lines, which seems to be the largest indicator of why the Russians attacked this city, is because it was about the closest. We can see that other cities that were as close to the front lines then, for example, Avdiivka, which is currently enveloped in a wine glass, their offensive would begin later, because once again, they are somewhat large towns close to the front lines, and so the Russians consider them to be larger propaganda victories than others. Bakhmut would never even serve a large strategic victory for the Russians in terms of the kind of supplies that they can deliver to Bakhmut and then distribute to the rest of their frontline forces. With only two highways, the M03 as well as the T0504 heading south to Konstantinivka, there really is no way that these highways and Bakhmut kind of tie together. Yes, Bakhmut is on the T0504, but it is not on the M03. In that sense, Krasnohora would be far more important as a supply hub to keep Russian forces moving towards the town of Slavyansk to the north than it would be to take Bakhmut, as Bakhmut has really no significance to the advance down the M03. It does, however, have some significance to the advance down the T0504, considering it is a fortress town that is located along this highway. But that is really the only reason worthwhile of taking it. It does not really serve much of a strategic purpose on its own. And one thing that we have seen is that the amount of casualties that are being inflicted by the Ukrainian forces onto the Russians has been incredibly high. At this moment, we estimate that around 30,000 Russian soldiers have died in the second battle alone, and an unaccounted for number of armored vehicles has also been destroyed during this battle, absolutely wrecking the Russian forces that find themselves fighting in this area. Of course, most of these forces are actually a part of the Wagner PMC. As we understand, they make up the largest portion of the fighting forces that are currently inside of the city of Bakhmut itself. But they are supported by regular Russian forces to the north near the area of Krasnohora and Orikovo-Vasilievka, and also further to the south towards Klishkivka, where the 3rd Separate Brigade operates and tries to advance their front towards Ivanivsky and the T0504, also to cut off Bakhmut's supply lines to the rear. The Russians appear to be, over the next few days, most likely attempting to advance from the hillsides in towards the rear of Ukrainian lines to then force them to withdraw from more of the town. This appears to have been the normal motive at this point, as if I back up the map, you can see that this Russian advance right here has continued to form throughout a large part of the war, and you can see that Ukrainian defensive lines are now trying to make sure that these forces cannot conduct a breakthrough and then cut off and encircle the Ukrainian forces inside the town. And as we watch the progression, you can see that that appears to be the case as the Ukrainians are trying to solidify their position in the town. Going off of this, we would be very reasonable to assume, based off of current Russian movements in this battle, that the next Russian attack will most likely occur in this area and try and push forward towards the monument that has become very famous and has had many videos taken of it before it was destroyed about 2 weeks ago. The Russians will most likely try to advance to the compounds to the western side of the map here, which will then again force the Ukrainians to consider their defensive positions inside the city and see if it is time to withdraw or to try and hold the garrison, although they will be heavily lacking supplies at that point due to a lack of a reasonable supply line. This road right here, as far as we understand it, is either gravel or dirt. And so at this point of the year, it's almost impassable. So they'll have to once again review their defensive positions as the Russians do try and pull a maneuver like that and see if they need to retreat out of the town completely and start moving towards Chasiv Yar and the ridge lines behind the city. The Ukrainian and Russian supply lines are also being heavily hit right now by the Rasputitsa. As far as we understand, trucks are only relegated to the major highways that have been paved, and these are the ones in yellow, much like the T-0504 heading east to west through Ukraine, and the M03 heading north to south, of course, passing near the area of Krasnoora. These appear to be the only roads that are largely usable to Ukrainian and Russian supply trucks with a high amount of reliability, meaning that the supplies that are shipped there actually make it to their intended destination. Going down dirt and gravel roads can pose some serious issues to the supply trucks, as they, of course, can get bogged down, and the supplies may not make it, or the progress may be incredibly slow, not fast enough to keep up with the supply demands of the army. This is another thing that the Ukrainians are, of course, keeping in mind, as a large amount of the Russian supply bases appear to be focused to the rear of Bakhmut, more so to the east, and also in the area of Odradivka. And although this road is not a major highway, from what we understand, it is a paved road. And so a lot of Russian forces, and the reason why we may not be seeing a large amount of advances here, is because the supply line out of the truck into the infantry themselves that are currently fighting the Ukrainians near the highway is quite lengthy. It's about 2.5 to 3 miles long, and that's quite sizable, especially considering that soldiers, from what we are understanding, are having to largely hand carry the supplies, or it's having to be carried by an MTLB, which then could, of course, be destroyed, since once they pass the area of Klishkivka, they enter this open, flat plateau near the area of Ivaniske. This is once again posing a lot of challenges to the Russian attackers and giving the Ukrainians a needed advantage during this battle. So, of course, it seems as though right now, while the Russians will most likely be able to finally take the city of Bakhmut, it did, of course, take them nearly 5 to 6 months and cost them around 20 to 30,000 soldiers in total, and of course an unaccounted amount of armored vehicles. Considering that, the Ukrainians holding and fighting for this town has served to be a victory in their own sense, as the Russians will most likely not be able to recuperate the losses they had in trained soldiers and advanced vehicles, and they'll now be resorting to even more conscripts, most likely taking the Wagner completely out of action, and also drawing up old supply reserves of T-54s, T-55s, and T-62s to try and keep their armored force at least existing in some form. And so with that, I hope that explains the Battle of Bakhmut as we're seeing it today. Of course, I thank everyone so much for watching this video. If you do enjoy it, make sure to subscribe, as we try and put out videos like this as much as we can. It's been fairly rare recently, but we'll be trying to get to more of them since college is ending very soon. And so with that, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.